Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're digging into something pretty critical, the recent flare-up between India and Pakistan, looking at the situation as of May 9th, 2025.
That's right. And we're drawing heavily on an analysis from IFL Capital, which features insights from Colonel Ajay Shukla, the veteran defense commentator.
Yeah, his perspective, combined with the timeline of what actually happened, gives us a really important window into this, well, very tense period.
Mhm.
So our goal here is pretty straightforward. Unpack the main reasons behind these tensions, look at the big risks involved, and see what paths, if any, the analysis suggests for, calming things down.
Okay, let's get into it. So first off, setting the scene around May 9th, the analysis points out this background of, well, long-running tensions that just hadn't been resolved.
Right, and then these recent military clashes have made things especially fragile.
Exactly. And the spark, the immediate trigger for this latest round, seems to have been that awful terrorist attack in Pahalgam, April 22nd.
Yeah, where 26 civilians were killed. Just terrible. Initially claimed by the resistance front, but then they apparently retracted that,
They did. And India's reaction was very strong, very fast.
blaming Pakistan pretty much immediately.
Yes, leading to serious diplomatic consequences. Expelling diplomats, for one.
And pulling out of the Indus Waters Treaty, that's a huge deal, isn't it? That agreement's been around forever.
It really is a cornerstone of regional water sharing. Withdrawing sends a massive signal. And then, almost straight away, we saw armed skirmishes breaking out along the line of control. Started around April 23rd, 24th.
And Pakistan's counter moves, also pretty quick.
Yeah, closing their airspace and, maybe even more symbolically, suspending the Shimla Agreement. That was between April 25th and 29th.
The Shimla Agreement from '72, meant to be the framework for peace. Suspending it really underlines the breakdown.
It does. Then things escalated militarily. India launched Operation Sindoor May 6th and 7th,
What was the stated aim of that?
targeting infrastructure linked to Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jem and Leti.
Inside Pakistan itself and in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir.
Correct. And during this, Pakistan claimed it shot down Indian jets.
A claim India hasn't publicly confirmed.
Not according to the analysis, no. Managing information, becomes a weapon itself in these situations.
All right. And the cycle just kept going, unfortunately getting worse.
Pakistan retaliated May 7th, 8th. Heavy shelling, mortar fire. Tragically, civilians were killed in Poonch.
And there were reports of drone and missile attacks towards Indian cities.
Yes, though apparently intercepted by India's S-400 system,
And India hit back again.
with C-8 and dead operations.
Yeah.
Suppression and destruction of enemy air defenses. Basically trying to knock out Pakistan's air defense capabilities, reportedly near Lahore, that's high-stakes stuff, aimed at gaining air control.
Wow. And even after that, Pakistan kept targeting India.
Seems so. As of May 8th, the analysis indicated continued targeting across J&K, Punjab, Rajasthan, Gujarat.
Mostly intercepted, but the fact they kept trying.
Exactly. It shows the aggression level remained high. And Operation Sindoor was still officially active then, needing some kind of formal settlement to end.
So this intense military back and forth. To understand why it got so bad, the analysis looks closely at Pakistan's leadership. This is where it gets really interesting.
Mm-hmm. The report flags the change when General Asim Munir became Army Chief in 2022.
How does it contrast him with the previous General Bajwa?
But Bajwa was apparently seen as more pragmatic. The analysis, drawing on Colonel Shukla's view, paints Munir very differently, calls him the leader of Pakistan for all practical purposes,
Okay.
and significantly the most overtly religious army chief since Zia-ul-Haq.
Wow, that's a strong comparison. Zia-ul-Haq's era had huge implications.
It did. And Munir is also characterized as more reactive, maybe more prone to taking risks, and potentially less interested in diplomatic fixes compared to ideological ones.
Which the report argues could be destabilizing, both internally for Pakistan and for its international image.
That seems to be the concern raised, yes. It suggests this leadership style might favor responses driven more by ideology, potentially escalating things unintentionally.
The analysis also brings in history here, doesn't it? Mentions the Kargil War.
It does. It draws a parallel, suggesting that back then, like perhaps now, Pakistan's civilian political leadership was relatively weak compared to the military.
And it mentions the historically difficult relationships the Sharifs, both Nawaz and Shahbaz, have had with the military establishment.
Right, all pointing to the significant power the army chief seems to wield currently.
There's also that specific point about General Munir's background, something about lacking Western military training.
Yeah, the analysis apparently highlights that, maybe using a chart or figure. It notes he's unlike many previous Army chiefs in that regard.
Does Colonel Shukla or the analysis speculate on how that might affect his strategic thinking, compared to leaders exposed to, say, NATO doctrines or international norms?
It raises the question, certainly, how might that different perspective influence decisions in a crisis like this one? It's a key factor they seem to be considering.
Okay, let's pivot to India's side of the equation. How's India positioned internationally in all this?
Well, the analysis suggests India has been quite active and pretty successful in rallying international support since the Pahalgam attack.
Really? What's driving that support?
The report mentions something it calls a growing fatigue in Western democracies toward Pakistan.
Interesting phrasing.
Yeah. And maybe, alongside that, a greater acceptance of India's strategic narrative or interests.
So Pakistan's feeling more isolated.
That's the picture painted, relying mainly on China, Turkey, and perhaps only reluctant support from Saudi Arabia.
What about Russia? They're usually a significant player.
That's complicated. The analysis describes Russia's stance as more neutral, calling for de-escalation, not the kind of unwavering support China apparently showed Pakistan.
Why the caution from Russia?
The suggestion is Russia's in a bit of a bind, maybe uncomfortable with India's closer ties to the U.S.,
Right.
but also Russia itself is increasingly reliant on China, which complicates things further.
And India is trying to manage that.
Reportedly, yes. Trying to reassure Moscow that the U.S. relationship isn't aimed against Russian interests. It's a very tricky diplomatic dance for everyone.
Definitely sounds like it. Okay, let's talk hardware and military realities on the ground.
One point the analysis makes is that, surprisingly perhaps, there hasn't been a lot of direct clashes between Indian and, say, Chinese-made equipment in this recent round.
But Indian domestic equipment is performing well.
That's what the report suggests. It mentions things like the Agni ballistic missiles and Indian-built warships, frigates, destroyers, corvettes, highlighting the high level of indigenous production there.
But the core offensive stuff, tanks, APCs, the S-400 submarines, that's mostly Russian.
Predominantly, yes, according to the analysis, which again just shows you these complex international defense ties.
And we touched on this earlier, but the information war aspect, especially around those claimed fighter jet losses.
Crucial. Pakistan claiming shoot-downs, India not confirming. The analysis suggests that admitting losses could be a big symbolic win for Pakistan.
And could affect how de-escalation plays out.
Potentially, yes. It could shift perceptions of who's under more pressure. So controlling that narrative is strategically vital.
So where does all this leave us in terms of de-escalation? Things still seem incredibly tense.
Very much so. The analysis indicates that even if India feels it met its objectives with Operation Sindoor, the underlying tensions haven't gone away.
Both sides are kind of walking a tightrope.
Seems like it. A strategic contest, balancing military pressure with diplomatic signals.
And the big danger is miscalculation.
Exactly. The risk of escalation stays high as long as each side thinks the other might be feeling the heat more. It's precarious.
But there might be talks happening behind the scenes.
The analysis suggests it's likely. These quiet diplomatic communications back channels, perhaps involving national security advisors.
History shows that happens even when things are publicly very bad.
Yes, there's precedent for India and Pakistan maintaining these links even during major crises.
But getting to actual de-escalation, stopping the fighting, that needs agreement from both.
Fundamentally, yes.
Yeah.
The analysis points out that sometimes things like returning captured pilots have offered a way out in the past. Humanitarian gestures.
But those opportunities are rare.
Very rare, and you can't count on them. Without a clear off-ramp that both sides can accept without losing face, the report suggests this uncertainty and the danger could drag on.
Okay, so wrapping this up. This deep dive, based on the IFL Capital analysis, paints a really concerning picture, a very fragile situation as of early May 2025.
Yeah, you've got the leadership dynamics in Pakistan, perceived as more assertive, more ideologically driven maybe.
India pushing back militarily, but also working hard on the diplomatic front, seemingly with some success.
Then there's a whole complex web of international support, or lack thereof, shaping how countries are reacting.
And beneath it all, this really uncertain path towards actually lowering the temperature. De-escalation seems far from guaranteed.
It really underscores how everything is connected, doesn't it? Military moves, diplomatic statements, probably domestic political pressures we haven't even touched on much.
Definitely. The margin for error just seems incredibly thin.
Worryingly so.
Which leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on. Given everything we've discussed, the leaders, the international pressures, the military actions, but what else could happen? What unforeseen factor, maybe non-state actors, maybe a sudden international push, could either tip this over the edge into something worse, or maybe, just maybe, create an unexpected chance to step back from the brink?
A lot to think about.
Indeed. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.